Hey everyone, in today's video I'll be going over the KCGT main tournament, showcasing my deck and going over the games I played. Also, I'm sorry for taking a while to upload this video. I had a few things going on, but yeah, now it's ready. As always, check the description. I'll leave timestamps so you can just skip to the part you're interested in. But yeah, let's get started. So first, going over the deck, I wanted to talk about why I decided to use a 30 card Harpie deck. So before going over the actual deck I used, I want to preface the tournament and the days leading up to the tournament. About a week before the event, in all the community held tournaments, onomats were pretty much running around everywhere. So at the time, that was like the standard version of onomats, which had like Dodo Draw and Utopic Onomatopoeia and cards like that. But then a few days before the KCGT, a control style variant of onomats popped up, and this variant used cards like Canadia and Drowning Mirror Force and cut down on the amount of onomat cards in the deck. That deck also started to evolve, so they cut down on the back row and started running Fiendish Chain, which is a good card in the mirror match. And then like about 2 nights before the event, Ritual Beasts with Endless Trap Hell started popping up as well. So the KCGT meta essentially became onomats, or a deck that counters onomats, or a deck that counters the decks that counter onomats. What I predicted was onomats, which are basically a combination of the control variant and standard variant. They would take up the largest share of the decks in the event. And then another deck I thought was good was Thunder Dragons, so I thought that would take up a decent amount. And then the rest were decks that tried to counter onomat. For example, decks like Shiranui. And there will always be Cyber Dragons in any event as well, so that was another possibility. So if I was playing the event and if I owned every single card and deck in the game, I would probably run Thunder Dragons because I thought that was probably the best choice running into the event. But I don't have Thunder Dragons, and even if I did, I'm probably not that good at using that kind of deck anyway. So my options were basically a Harpie deck, Cyber Dragons or Shiranui, or Masked Heroes or Trimids. And I dropped Trimids because I thought MST would be popular, and Trimids auto lose to MST, so I just didn't want to risk that. Cyber Dragons, I think Cyber Dragons were okay, but you need to get kind of lucky with the onomat matchup, and yeah, I just always seem to break when playing that deck anyway, so I didn't really want to try that. So my 2 remaining options were Harpies and Shiranui. In regards to Harpies, I only have 2 Book of Moon, so I pretty quickly decided that running a thin Harpie deck was probably not a good idea, because running 2 Book of Moons and 3 Chalices in a 23 card deck is not that good. If I had 3-3, then it would be okay, but since I only have 2 Book of Moon, I decided not to. I did try to run a 20 card Harpie deck, but that deck seemed to run out of resources really quickly, so I didn't want to use that. So I basically decided on running a 30 card Harpie deck because of a few reasons. The first one being, rather than running quick play spells like Book of Moon and Chalice, I can run traps instead, which are generally high in power, although they are worse going second. I also like this version because with Hysteric Sign, you can basically gain a lot of resources really quickly. My goal with this deck wasn't to win on turn 2, it was to win on turn 3 or turn 4. Basically, as long as I survive my opponent's first battle phase, I should win the game, because I should by that stage have enough resources to push for game. In terms of the card choices I use in the deck, I think the monsters I use are pretty standard. Kiteroid was a choice I added into the deck because I still had a limit 2 option left, and it's a great card to prevent yourself from getting OTK'd. Also, no one's going to expect it in Harpies anyway, so I thought it would have a surprise factor as well. And if you end up deciding to discard it with one of the trap cards, it still has a graveyard effect as well, which means that it's not completely useless when you discard it. Another interesting choice is Herald of the Abyss. This is kind of a replacement for Book of Moon, although it's completely worthless when you go first. However, it does have advantages. For example, you can bypass Forbidden Lands, and you can also use it against the Thunder Dragons as well, because the monsters sent to the graveyard have their effects negated. It's also just a 1-for-1 removal, so you don't need to like use Book and then attack over it, it just straight up removes the card. However, Kiteroid and Herald, I didn't draw either of these in the entire 6 games I played, so I can't comment on how good they were during the event. However, in practice leading up to the event, I think they did alright. The spell lineup is pretty standard, and then for the traps, 3 Raigeki Break, 1 Divine Wrath and 1 Karma Cut. So I like Raigeki Break now in this format because you can hit monsters and back row, whether they're face up or face down. Karma Cut This is a good card. It's great against certain types of decks that you prefer having those cards getting banished rather than going to the graveyard. But Divine Wrath, this was the card I definitely wanted to add into this deck. The reason I wanted to use it was because Gargaga Head was so strong, and I just wanted to stop that at all costs. And if I have Divine Wrath, it's the best counter towards Gargaga Head, because if I have Fiendish Chain, they can chain MST or lands to stop it, but with a counter trap, you basically can't stop it. Well, this is a bit of a spoiler, but in one of the games I basically won because I used Divine Wrath on Gargaga Head. So I'm really happy I included it. However, I didn't want to run multiple copies because this is a reactive card. You can't advance your own game state by using it whenever you want. You have to wait for your opponent to do something to use it. That's why I only ran one copy. For the extra deck, I think it's pretty standard. My Strike was for Cyber Dragons and TTH. Malevolent Sin is a staple. Roach was against Thunder Dragons, and I think Ritual Beasts as well. Abyss Dweller was just against like Fire Kings, and if there somehow happened to be Blue Eyes. And number 22 was for the mirror match. So I think when you enter a tournament, there's 3 ways you can decide on what deck to use. The first one being you use the so-called best deck. So the deck that everyone considers the best, you use that one. The second one is using a deck that counters the best deck. So in this case, it would be like trap heavy decks, for example, Shiranui or Ritual Beast. Now the third one, which is the option I took, was a deck that counters the counter of the best deck. I thought Onomats were the best, and I thought trap decks would counter Onomat. So I wanted to run Harpies to counter the trap decks. For example, the control version of Onomat, Shiranui, and Ritual Beast. Basically, there were 3 main decks that this deck countered, and I thought I could probably match up against them. So I was hoping to match up against them and get easy wins like that. So my prediction was kind of correct. There were a lot of control Onomats, and there were Shiranuis and Ritual Beasts as well. However, I unfortunately didn't manage to play against any of them, so while my prediction was accurate, my matchups were a bit unlucky in that sense. So that's it for the deck profile, and I'll be going into the games. Also, this video might be split into 2 parts, so part 1 might cover this deck profile in games 1 and 2, and part 2 might cover the games 3 to 6. So yep, onto the games. Alright, so onto the first match. My opponent is using Onomats and is going first. So their opening, I think the opening could have been better, but it was still fairly solid. So basically they end up with Bouncer and 1 back row. And the back row, I pretty much make a read that it's Book of Moon. It could also have been Lance or maybe Chalice, but I was pretty confident it was Book of Moon, so I was just playing as if it was Book. So the draw from Gargaga Head is really strong. It often helps them gain back advantage even if they use a lot of cards to make their plays. It's my turn. So I have a few different options here. What I could have done was I could have summoned Oracle and forced out the back row. However, if I did that, it would mean that after I set both my trap cards, I would have only 2 cards left in my hand, and if I have to use both of my traps, then I have to give up my whole hand to do so. And it wouldn't be bad if I had like a Harpist or Hysteric Sign, but I don't want to discard either of these cards if I have to, so I would rather discard Oracle, which is why I just set both traps and ended. And my opponent goes, he summons Utopic Onomatopoeia and just attacks. What I do is I use Karma Cut, discarding Oracle and targeting the Bouncer, because I can't really get anything started if Bouncer's on the field. And yep, I draw Egotist, so I basically won at this point, just need to sequence out my moves. So just use Egotist, summon another Harpie, then summon Cyber Slash, activate the second Egotist, bounce Utopic, and then attack with both for game. So yep, that's game 1 finished. I was pretty happy about how that went. I think my opponent briefed quite a bit, even with Onomats, which is surprising. That was lucky. For game 2, I'm up against Cyber Dragons, and once I saw Insane, I was like, oh no, this is not gonna go well. However, yeah, as you can already tell, I did win this one, so I was happy. I go first, and my opening hand is not bad because I have Raigeki Break with Hysteric Sign. So if he has Fusion Gate, I can destroy it with Raigeki Break, so that's pretty good. And if I survive this turn, I can probably make a big swing the next turn. So my goal was to make sure to survive this turn, and that means setting both Raigeki Break and Egotist, because if they have Cosmic Cyclone, I want them to hit Egotist instead, because Raigeki Break is like the one card that can save me here. I also set Harpist, and the reason for doing so is in the following turn, after I summon my first monster, if it gets hit by Book of Moon or Overflow, then I still have another monster on the field that I can use with Egotist. My opponent sets 3 and ends, so I was pretty happy that they didn't open core. So in the end phase, I Raigeki break one of his back row. Unfortunately, I hit Drowning, which was the worst card to hit. The following turn, summon Channeler, it instantly gets hit by Book, which is fine, because I still have the previous monster I set from turn 1. I flip it up, there's no delay, I activate Egotist, summon Harpie Lady 1, and destroy the back row, and yeah, he doesn't bother searching because it's exactly 4,000 life points of damage. So yeah, that's game 2, goes to me. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like button, comment and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any more of my future videos. See you in the next video.